Woke, woke. There are so many things going on around. You must take heed. It's been written and prophesied about, so you must believe. Not everything that glitters is gold. Pay attention as it's been told. Join us every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, with Brother Yusuf as he tackles and breaks down current events, current news, and politics, and the Islamic Ummah. Please join us, streaming on all major platforms. Channel Sunnah Followers.
This in with some news that I did see this week. We're going to tie it into our good old friends who are calling all the Ummah to blindly obey their rulers and saying that this is Islam. We're going to expose that. But the main thing we're going to be tackling tonight is the plague of feminism and what we are seeing in terms of the genocidal birth rates around the world. I'm going to explore this topic at a level that I have not seen in this Ummah. And why are we concerned so much with the West? Because, as I've said before, what they're doing to the West is only what's coming to us. It is already here in many cases. So we are going to be doing a deep dive into the biggest plague, I think, that's affecting modern man, the destruction of the family through feminism and what I call female hypergamy. We're going to look into all of that in detail. Lots of stats, going to be very heavy tonight. Hopefully, y'all enjoy it, and I'm going to have a very good time, I'm sure, bringing this information, trying to help people out in understanding what exactly we're up against here. So first and foremost, what got me inspired, actually, I had originally standard news show planned, and then I saw this, and it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me an idea and inspiration, and I just went with it. And I started writing and just really couldn't stop writing. I just kept going and going and going, and I'm like, well, I just need to go there. I've been studying this issue all my life, so I should just go there. And what the issue was that I saw was there's an area in Saudi Arabia known as Al Fil, Jabal Al Fil. It's hard for me to say some of these Arabic words, but in English that translates to Elephant Rock. It is one of these new tourist locations that they have built, and they had a massive party there. And needless to say, clothing was optional from the looks of the party. You saw women scantily clad, half naked. You saw, very sinful conduct and dancing. I mean, it looked, just like any type of rave or one of these things you'd see in San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York. And there wasn't really much of a distinction there. If someone didn't tell me this was Saudi Arabia, I really would have had no idea. And it really, like I said, when I got the inspiration, it really put a burn in my chest, because as we're going to see with this lecture tonight, it's like the equivalent of someone celebrating the burning of the fire for their own cremation. It's like these people are so gullible and are so, I don't want to say the word stupid because it's not stupid. Stupid is a natural state. It's more like blissfully ignorant that they don't see exactly what is being done to them. They have no clue. To them, this is liberation. It is freedom. This is the dawning of a new era. How great life is going to be. But like I said, it's the equivalent of me going and lighting a fire for my own cremation. I'm basically preparing my own destruction. As you can see there, as I described it here, the adjective, a wild party. And I saw these clips on YouTube, and I said again, clothing was optional. This is Saudi Arabia. Wow. And again, this brings up that question that I've highlighted a lot and I go to a lot. And anyone who knows me knows what my feelings are, but I'm going to share Islamically this whole issue of trusting your leaders. Because anytime you raise something like this, you are going to have somebody come out of their mother's basement. You are going to have some guy come from out of the woodwork, some way out of here to bash you, tell you to stay in your lane, to attack you, say all kinds of horrible, hurtful things. Well, not really hurtful to me, but to some people they might be. Me, I'm always the type of person who really could care less. But that's what's going to happen because they're going to tell you it's your Islamic duty to trust the leaders. The leaders know more than we do. We've kind of mocked that view. So let's get to the Islamic point. Before I get to my topic, I want to kind of put this matter to rest. For those of you who are new, who may hear this type of rhetoric, just to clearly know with authentic, every hadith I'm going to mention, I will name. They are all rated as sahih. These are from our collections. This is what the stance is from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu on following the rulers. And then we're going to match it to what we're seeing previously I just highlighted and what we're going to be talking about going forward. So our first one, this is a hadith. We're going to find this hadith basically in Sahih Bukhari 2956. I heard Allah's messenger say, "We are the last, but will be the foremost to enter paradise." The Prophet added, "He who obeys me obeys Allah." We're very familiar as Muslims. That's basic. This in the Quran, highlighted, whatever the messenger gives you, you take it. Obviously, you were here to put the messenger as the judge and jury of all your affairs. You were to follow the messenger. He is Allah's representative on earth. Nothing new there. So let's continue. He who disobeys me disobeys Allah. Every Muslim obviously can agree with that statement. He who obeys the chief obeys me, and he who disobeys the chief disobeys me. The Imam is like a shelter for whose safety the Muslims should fight and where they should seek protection. If the Imam orders people with righteousness and rules justly, then he will be rewarded for that. And if he does the opposite, he will be responsible for that. Pretty clear so far. We are to show respect to our leaders. As Sister Layla was talking about before I went live, we saw, the challenges that come, the more responsibility you have. Prophets were the people that dealt with the most struggles, the most tests. Leaders are under tremendous pressure, and we should honor them and respect them for the decisions that they are making if they're genuine people. Now I'll go on to another hadith. This hadith is found in Sahih Muslim, also Riyadh Sahih, number 1854. In the near future, there will be amirs, and you will like their good deeds and dislike their bad deeds. One who sees through their bad deeds and tries to prevent their repetition by his hand or through his speech is absolved from blame. So right here we see, if we see them, we are there to use our hand or our speech to do this in a diplomatic, Islamic, gentlemanly, if you will, way. You're absolved from that. But one who hates their bad deeds in his heart of heart, being unable to prevent their reoccurrence by his hand or his tongue, is also, faith, the word used there, so far as God's wrath is concerned. But one who approves of their bad deeds and imitates them is spiritually ruined. People asked, "Oh, Holy Prophet, should we fight against them?" He replied, "No, as long as they say their prayers." This is a hadith that's commonly used to justify blindly obeying the rulers. This is not what it says, is we're going to put this all together with the next hadith that I'm going to mention. So right here again, they've got bad deeds. They make mistakes. They're praying. They're still Muslims. They're just human. They may make a mistake. I converted to Islam, about by this point 15 years ago, and I made slip-ups when I converted. I drank alcohol. I went back to my old ways, only to come out of them. Was I bad for that? I made a mistake. Was I someone that if I was in a position of authority, should I be killed or overthrown? Absolutely not. It's an error. These leaders are going to make mistakes. There's nothing wrong with being human. We all repent to Allah. Allah loves when we repent. But now let's go and look and put this all together. We find another hadith. This is in Sunan Ibn Majah, 2861, narrated by Hussein. She heard the Messenger of Allah say, "Even if the one appointed over you is a mutilated Ethiopian slave whose nose and ears have been cut off, listen to him and obey him so long as he leads you according to the book of Allah." That's the statement I want to focus on tonight. That last part is key. That ties it all in. So long as he follows the book of Allah. Now, a lot of Christian apologists will cite this hadith, saying that the Messenger of Allah was racist, that Islam is anti-black. He was using an example of a slave, happened to be of a certain nationality. If he named any nationality, it would have been seen as racist from another group if you had Christian apologists back then trying to dig through our books and find things that they could use on us. That's not what he was saying at all. He was taking a general statement. If someone had been mutilated, someone was in a position where his nose, his ears have been cut off, he can't even hear you, but he's your leader, you still should respect him and follow him as long as he's leading with the book of Allah. So this is, again, we can understand the intent of these statements. It's very clear. You bring it all together, you are going to see it. There are conditions of obedience. It must be in accordance with the book of Allah. In order for a leader to be justly judged, there has to be a criteria. There has to be a standard. In America, they swear by the Constitution. by the Bill of Rights. This is the criterion which the leadership in this country is supposed to be judged by. For us, it's the Book of Allah and the statements of the last and final messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If anyone is leading us away from that, we should obviously take action. Now, again, we shouldn't just up and grab swords and form a revolt. No, there are many different ways that you can take action. You can take action by properly educating your children. You can take action by what I call civil disobedience. You disobey these haram commands, civilly, as a gentleman, as a dignified Muslim. You educate, you form your own groups, you basically spread the message around, educate the people who are blindly following these activities. This is how you can do it. There are several ways. That's a whole subject matter for another time, but this is, again, the key of this. There's no blindly following when people are bringing in singers encouraging you to commit zina, when they are bringing in all these different artists and acts encouraging you to engage in polytheism and shirk. These go against the Book of Allah, and this is not a situation where you should be blindly following and obeying your leaders. When your leaders are telling you it's okay that your brothers and sisters are being massacred, 55,000 or more at this point, that's okay. No, it's not. So I wanted to start off with that because now we're going to direct into some of the things that these leaders are promoting now in our countries. But we are going to get a bit of a background on how bad this problem is globally, because this feminism is a global situation. So what we're going to talk about is there is a plague right now going on in the world. Birth rates, I'm going to give you very detailed statistics on where we're at with that. The destruction of the family, not just in the West, but also in the Far East, also in Africa, also in South America. This is a global problem. And one of the key components we're going to start with is women being engaged in pornography. There is a website that has now taken the world by storm. I thought at the time in 2019 when I first heard of this, that I was one of the last people to come to the party on this. And usually I'm one of the first. I pride myself on that. And a guy was telling me at work, and I'm like, I've never heard of this. What in the world? And it's called OnlyFans. And the OnlyFans is a subscription-based website where it was founded by a gentleman by the name of Tim Stokely. Mr. Stokely's original intent for this platform was pretty benign. It was harmless. It was a content place where celebrities and artists of music and movie, comedy, whatever it may be, historians, they could engage with their fans for monthly fees, monetize these interactions, if you will. So if I was a writer and people wanted to hear me give my own personal elaboration on something, I could do a video, they could subscribe to me, get that information. It started off as something harmless. Well, he would sell this platform in 2018 to a billionaire from the Ukraine known as Leonid Ravinsky. Needless to say, if you followed my work, what origin this gentleman was. The same origin of the people who promoted gangster rap music, the same origin of the people who run the banks, the same, you know the story. We've covered it quite extensively. This guy got his claim to fame two ways. One, he was running pornography where he was selling password hacks to a variety of pay-for porn sites, where you would subscribe to him and he would give you these passwords that would work and allow people to go into porno paid premium sites and access this content. His other things he came up with called My Free Cams, which was similar to what Andrew Tate was doing and made his fortune off of, which was webcams, where you would pay money to watch, obviously, nude models. Now, he would immediately take this harmless idea and turn it into something quite sinister. As we would see in 2023, OnlyFans would rise to heights of 6.6 billion with a B. This stew between the dynamic of a man and a woman. If the woman is earning so much money like this, you're going to see as I go on exactly what this is causing. This is causing a major disruption. It's trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. You are seeing women now earning more than men with zero skills, just simply selling their bodies. So again, all this is intentional. The desired outcome is being fully witnessed in our society. One of the goals that you'll hear, we're going to talk about this in the coming weeks, is the 2030 agenda. Every Arab country has this. When I lived over there, it was I left in 2000 and beginning of 2018, I officially left. You were seeing 2030 vision, 2030 vision, plastered everywhere. Now, when you hear the 2030 vision, there's a lot of tenets of that. One of them is a term they call sustainable development, which means basically less of us consuming less. It is tied into the climate agenda, which I've talked about here as well. And again, the best type of genocide that you can inflict is a genocide where the people do not understand what is going on. The plummeting of the birth rates around the world is something you see frequently mentioned in the media. Now we're going to take a look at this, shall we? This data I'm going to talk about now comes from the United Nations World Population Prospects document, which was published in 2020. They're very thrilled with these results. They love to celebrate what they are doing. And it's gotten worse since then, but this is the last one I was able to dig up. Now, these were compiled between 1950 and 2021. So let's first start with Asia. South Korea, number one. 86% reduction in births in South Korea during this period of time. 86%. If you look at the births per woman in South Korea, it is 1.06 to 1.10, I believe. So they're having basically one child for every woman. They're not even replacing themselves. They're going down double. And it's accelerating as each generation goes and the population pool goes low and low. China, minus 81%. A lot of that is attributed to their one-child policy, which they enacted. They've recently pulled back a bit on that. Thailand, minus 79. Japan, minus 77. India, minus 63%. So even India, which is kind of synonymous with its large population, is still seeing a decline in birth rates. You go to the West, Poland leads the way, negative 69. Russia, 67. Italy, 65. Canada, negative 63. US at negative 52. That is only as high as it is, still low, but only as high as it is due to the influx of a lot of immigrants, first generation, who came from traditional cultures in the Muslim Arab world or basically South America. But you find when their kids grow up, the same birth rate patterns are continuing because they are getting seduced by the things that we're going to talk about later in this presentation. England, 39, minus 39%. That's also the same thing. You have lots of Asian immigrants coming into England, lots of African immigrants coming into England. You're seeing traditional cultures. First generation, they're having a ton of children. By the second and the third, you're seeing, again, they're adopting, most Muslims, by the way, adopting the patterns of the West. So surely, we are the keepers of the family. Islam is all about the family. It's all about having large families. It's all about that father running the home and the respect of the father, the valuing of the mother and her responsibilities, the honoring of your mother, as the Prophet ﷺ famously said. But we see the same thing. Turkey, minus 68%. Saudi Arabia, minus 67. Morocco, minus 66. Egypt, minus 58. Pakistan, minus 37. So we are being quietly killed off. The weapons they use to hide this, a lot of the ways, is immigration. Now, I've talked about all the different effects of immigration before, the negative effects, the breaking up of cultures, the security issues, and the crime. But one other reason for immigration is it really kind of covers up, it keeps the economies, the bubble economies of the West going. And you also don't know how much you're shrinking. You won't notice it. Because if you're in England, the population is booming. But it's not booming from your natives. It's booming from all the immigrants you're bringing in. Same thing I was mentioning before with America and Canada. So when you keep on flowing all these immigrants in, you keep these social security, these pension systems, all these economic bubbles going, but you're covering up the fact that your population simply is dying. It is not replacing itself. And as I mentioned, these Muslim immigrants come in, they adopt this behavior. We are adopting it. Not we all, but collectively, the Ummah is also adopting it as well. As Bill Gates famously had said in 2000, they would get the population down. He mentioned two things. One is the focus of the topic tonight. One will be the focus of a topic later on. He said female rights and vaccination programs. Now, vaccination programs obviously, kind of sticks out. Why? How? Well, that's a whole different story for a different time. But female rights and women's empowerment was something that he highlighted. Bill Gates just said a few weeks ago, he said, we're not going to need people anymore because we're going to get the AI ready, except for those we choose. And again, that's another topic, for another time. But he specifically, this sinister individual, mentioned women's rights as a catalyst for accomplishing this. So how, again, does pornography, OnlyFans, and all this stuff tie in? Well, I'm going to show you. Modern feminism and the sheer level of attention that modern women are getting has made the vast majority of men undesirable. We can see this clear as day when we look at data that has been obtained through dating websites. This is compiled in a study that was done recently, got really famous in social media, from OkCupid and all the other different dating apps that are out there. And they found that you took what the average woman was rating a man on the dating site opposed to what men were rating women. And this is staggering. We saw women rating men as least attractive or ugly, you can say 27%. Women found in these studies that almost 30% of the men they saw were what they would call ugly. 31% they defined as not attractive. So you add that two together, that's over half, close to 60% of men that women found to simply be not attractive. 23% they found as slightly unattractive. It goes up now to 81% of men, Western women. This is purely what we're basing this on. There's no sisters involved, but it's coming. Trust me, it's coming. They find men unattractive. 12% of guys they find as slightly, 5% moderate, and 2 they found attractive. 2 in 100 men, these women rated as attractive. This is, and we're going to get to the reasons why. A lot of it goes with the social media culture, the attention, the sense of entitlement, false images by the media. But this is not biologically sensible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not make men and women to find 81% of the other sex to be so undesirable. But we are seeing it. This is complete manipulation, completely man-made. For men, it's more balanced. They raised 6% of women on the bottom and 6% on the top. So you had 2 there. Highest level of attractiveness, ugly, as we could say unofficially or unprofessionally, but unattractive there on the bottom. Men were not men were open to basically majority of women. It was balanced. There was only 40% of women that men found to be undesirable. So you had 60% that men would consider to actively date or start a family with. So again, how does this translate now to what we're seeing in the world? Well, studies show over 70% of US women are sexually active currently. To contrast this, 35% of men are found to have no sexual activity during similar time periods. Another study, we saw 24% of males had not been intimate with a woman from 2022 to 2023 in comparison to 13% of women. This is from a highly sexualized kuffar society where sex is like shaking hands. They don't have any morals, they don't have any dignity attached to it. But yet, because of what's going on, you are seeing more and more men just falling off. Each year, the data is tracked, the numbers keep rising in favor of women and lowering for men. The pool of available men is shrinking, and all the women are desiring the attention of the top 2 to 10th percentile. Again, as examples from these same studies, women are listing on their dating sites that the only thing acceptable to them are men over 6 foot tall. That's one of their main criteria. It has to be tall. 14.5% of men in the United States are over 6 feet tall. So you look at that and you kind of compare it to what we saw earlier. You are seeing again, there's a huge, it's really 12% around that number of men, they are open to dating. 3.9% are taller than 6'2". Some women are even cresting 6'3", and you're talking about 3.9% of men. It gets worse. Not only do you have to be tall, but you also must be wealthy and make over 6 figures. Only 3% of men fit this description. The data aligns with the numbers I mentioned earlier, which shows their attraction to men. It's very low. 6 figures, 6 feet tall, or they believe that you have 0 shot at dating them. And again, we're talking about a highly sexualized kuffar society, a godless society. We are seeing this. So you might say, well, those numbers are extremely, it's off the charts. What does it make no sense? Well, It's again particular with Caucasian or white women who have been seduced. Now we're seeing it with African American women as well, who have been seduced by this world and all the things that are offered to it through the attention they are gaining on social media. If you're a man in this world, you pretty much are never going to meet these expectations unless you are that top percent. You couple that with the fact that women are notoriously horrible choosers of men. It's why in Islam, the father's opinion, his statement, his approval is required. I saw an online clip where there was this successful African American man from Atlanta, and he was a business owner. He's self-made, highly successful man, had done everything on his own, the clean way. And the females on the panel just simply were not interested in him. Why? Because he wasn't tall enough and he was what they called too nice. I talked to tons of these type of black men over my career that I worked with who were in managerial positions, who were investors, who traded stocks, were very successful, and they all were echoing this. They were telling me the same women that rejected them would have no problems basically dating a drug dealer or someone who was in jail multiple times. In fact, he said the women seem to prefer this. And I can vouch for this in the white community that I grew up in. You saw the same exact things. You saw the successful, hardworking, good white guys that were trying to work hard were simply being rejected while guys were going out there in bar fights and getting arrested and cheating on the women. They were getting all the women. So again, we see Allah's wisdom in the fact, the messenger of Allah Sallallahu wisdom in the fact that the father needed to be involved in the process of selecting a future husband. This had to be a man that was graded by the father. When I went to get married, her father graded me. I was looked at, what are your ambitions? Where are you going? What are you going to accomplish? What are you currently doing? What are your plans? These things were part and parcel of the process. In the West, they've been completely removed. And one of the selling points that men have to women is what Allah made us to be: strength, leadership, and ability to provide. But as we've discussed so many times in this society, men nowadays are raised without fathers in a lot of these homes and have been taught life skills by women. If you look at this from this perspective, let's think 77% of public school teachers are female. So you have these men who are growing up in these single parent homes. They're raised by women in the home. Then they go to school, and 77% of the time, it's also going to be a woman. This is counterproductive. This has never been how it's been in human history. You can look at when the Prophet ﷺ was growing up, he was sent to live out in the desert with the Bedouins. Why? To learn trade, to learn manhood, to learn all the aspects of growing up to be a man by men. A woman cannot teach a man how to be a man. It's not possible. They don't have the nature, to do it. And then you find women active in the workplace. They're given job preferences now in the United States and in Western Europe over men based on their sex. Women are now earning enough to not need a provider, anymore. Add in pornography, Instagram attention. What value at this point do men have to offer? If you're earning close to him, men still on average earn more than women, obviously. But if you're earning close, what as a man is you're taking away the man's job. And of course, they did all this for that reason, along with 2 taxable incomes. All these things were, very key in their strategies. A woman is not going to respect the man at that point when she's earning $165,000 on OnlyFans, when she's earning $10,000 a week, and the man is a manager in a factory or a construction site, and he's earning $90,000 to $100,000 a year. She's simply not going to respect him. She doesn't need him. The society has taken away his essence. His purpose is gone, at this point. And again, women are now getting the attention also along of this by millions of men. Millions of men are telling her on her Instagram page how beautiful she is, on her Facebook page how beautiful she is. She's looking at her husband. She's saying, wait a minute, I've got 1,000 guys giving me likes every single time I post something. I've got 10,000 men giving me likes every time I post something. Why am I with him? There's so much better out there. And it's human nature. and part of the weakness of all of us to constantly want to improve ourselves and better ourselves to our own detriment. Because there's always going to be someone who's better looking, more wealthy, a better catch. It's just a matter of time before you'll see no marriage at all if this present course continues. Because why? You're already seeing statements of these women in social media. They don't need a man. We're going to talk about that, how the evidence shows to the contrary. But they're constantly saying these terms. We don't need a man. Why do I want to be married? Why do I want to feel I owe my life to this other person when I can share my life with hundreds of men? There was a story this past week where this woman here in America was diagnosed with late stage terminal cancer, and she divorced her husband. And she was proud to post this. She divorced her husband. Why? Because she said, I'm going out. I want to go out with a bang. And she said her goal was to engage in intercourse with 100 men. And sure enough, I'm sure she went out there and she met that goal. And it didn't matter that he stood by her. None of that stuff mattered. Loyalty, God, the benefit of the society as a whole didn't matter. She wanted her thrill. Women, again, are constantly bombarded with unrealistic depictions of men and lifestyles. This makes them bitter and resentful to normal men, as we saw in those previous numbers. If they're watching a Hollywood film, the actor is good looking, he's tall, he's strong, he's athletic, he's money, he's the perfect specimen of man. Because why? He's unrealistic. He doesn't exist unless we're talking about half of a percent of total men out there. She's not going to look at her partner with any sense of admiration or respect. When you're constantly being shown these television shows, these reality shows where all these men are, just presented in this grandiose, way. So a man is not going to be able to be the head of household in these circumstances. Then in 1969, they really drove a nail in the coffin of marriage, which was kind of the beginning before all the pornography and things built upon that. And that was what they call no-fault divorce. In 1969, California would be the first state to accept this, where women can now just leave their husband with no reason at all. The husband could do it as well. We're going to see who's doing it since this system has taken hold. We hear excuses all the time, such as he was bored. I had a friend, his sister divorced her husband. They had 3 kids. And she told him, I was just bored with him. There was no magic there, anymore. The marriage was dull, so she wanted to go out and meet as many men as she could to find what she felt was an upgrade, if you will. So again, 69% of the time in this country with this no-fault divorce system has been initiated by women. They walk away with the man's assets, his house. In a lot of cases, he did nothing wrong. These laws were put in place in the West to protect women from predatory men. It goes both ways sometimes. We're seeing who's doing the no-fault divorces is overwhelmingly women. But if a man had put his whole life into a woman, a woman to put her whole life into the man, she never had worked, she'd always been a caretaker of the home, and then the man said, hey, look, I don't want you anymore, bye-bye. Where was she to go? Where was she going to end up? So the intent originally of the West appeared at face value to be good. But as we saw, it was obviously for something sinister. So again, you play with the law's guidelines, you play with his rules. You will face the consequences both in this world and the next. And here we can see some of the consequences. We see these effects show up in suicide statistics. In 2022, 22.9 of 100,000 men killed themselves. 22.9, in comparison to only 5.9% of females. Men are being broken by the loss of purpose, by loneliness. This system of female liberation does not work for them. It doesn't work for the women either, as we're going to see their statistics here in a second. But these men are just feeling they should just give up their lives. There is no point. I'm never going to have a family. I don't match up. No one's going to be happy. If I do meet a woman, she's going to take my money. 69% of the time, no-fault divorces, again, initiated by females. Almost half of American marriages now end up in divorce. So women, they're living on the high life, right? That's what the media says. This is what the media is teaching our sisters in the Muslim world. We talked about this last week where the imposter was going into the chats to basically lead Muslim women to divorce. This was an imposter that came in, pretended he was a Muslim female, and was trying to encourage the women to leave these marriages. So let's take a look at what happens when women now are on their own performing the duties of a man. Women hold nearly two-thirds of all student loan debt. Women hold 14% more credit card debt per dollar. So you have a dollar, you take 14% of that, than men. 90% of single parent homes are women. So how well are these single parent homes doing? According to numerous studies, single mothers and their children are at a higher risk of mental health issues, including anxieties and depression. Depression is by far more prevalent among these single mothers. In fact, 33% of them. According to the National Institute of Health, single mothers are more likely to engage in psychologically damaging, controlling behaviors on their children. They're not made to be disciplinarians. That's our job. That's what Allah made us to do. They fail miserably in this role. This leads to their children having massive mental health issues, anxiety, depression, lack of self-esteem. The men grow up, as I talked about earlier, they grow up feminine. They don't know how to be a man. There's no one there teaching them what male responsibility is. It gets worse. 80% of rapists were raised by single mothers. 70% of gang members were raised by single mothers. 85% of youth up to the age of 18 in prison come from single mother households. It ain't working. At least it's working exactly as the controllers want it to work, but it's not working for these women. According to the CDC, by the time a woman in the United States reaches the age of 60, 1 in 4 is actively or has in the past been actively on some form of antidepressant. This is horrible. I believe it's much higher than that from my personal experience. CDC says it is 1 in 4. Now, if you go into, this is where it gets really interesting. If you go into women who profess to be leftist, they embrace liberal ideology, it is 50%. 50% of Democrat left-leaning women in this country are on happy pills. They're on something to cope. But yet we're sold in the media that this is female lib, it's empowerment. They don't need a man. They can show their bodies. They can be just as promiscuous as they suspect men are. And we find the promiscuity numbers also now are sliding more to the women. When you see numbers like this in data, it doesn't lie. You can see these observations with your eyes. I've seen them. Their eyes don't lie. You know, you are seeing it here. You're looking up. You're seeing the numbers there as well. But if you listen again to popular music, you don't need no man. I mean, I'm focused here on the U.S., but the numbers are even worse, you know, in Europe, as they have a kind of advanced liberalism. They've embraced liberalism more fiercely, you know, over there. But I remember growing up, and it was just constant songs, particularly targeting Black women. Now you have your Taylor Swifts and your artists are targeting young white women with the same poison. Constantly, you don't need a man, you don't need a man, you don't need a man, you're strong, blah, blah, blah. And you find the male music is doing exactly the same with the opposite. You know, it is just, again, cancer. And men now are increasingly dropping out of the dating pool or the marriage pool. Date Psychology published a study that 45% of men 18 to 25 never asked a woman out on a date. Again, this is the promiscuity of a kuffar society. This should be way, way higher than this, or lower, I'm sorry, in this case. But it's just not happening. Men are basically scared. And again, why would they? You know, you'll not meet these standards. She's not going to be interested. She'll humiliate them. They call them creeps, you know, and all these things. Anybody here in America who's worked as a man in the American workforce knows the difference in modern day society between being called a creep or being called confident. It's just simply whether the woman likes you or not. I've seen men have their lives ruined at jobs just because they simply asked a woman out and she said he was harassing her. And these people I mean, I watched cameras of some of these things. I used to have control of the cameras for my job. I never saw any kind of stalking or harassing. It was just simply she didn't like him trying to talk to her and being interested in her in this way. So you're seeing 45% of men are just simply dropping out. I heard in South Korea, who had the highest decline in births around the world, it's close to 80% of the men over there, because feminism in Asia and Japan and Korea is out of control. And it's close to 80% of the men are just simply not even trying anymore. It's like they know they're not going to measure up. There was a video of a white Western female had went to South Korea, and she was talking about how she came to South Korea because she thought all the men looked like one of these boy bands that she had liked. And she said that all the South Korean men were ugly. It was just, again, telltale, of what we are seeing. And again, like, I know how these men feel. I grew up a little bit past generation, but I still saw it among myself and my friends. Before I became Muslim, it was involved in this dating world. And we all suffered. I gave up myself. I thought the same thing I'm telling you today. Why bother? And it wasn't even nearly, as bad back then as it has become today. It has gone crazy. Why would you even waste your time as a man trying to even engage when you know you're not going to meet these standards? You are most likely going to be rejected. So this is, again, only a kuffar problem, right? Only they're dealing with. It's not coming to the ummah, because we have the book of Allah. We are strong. Well, I wish I could say that was a true statement, but actually it is quite the opposite. We are seeing it now inflicting the Muslim world. Just read, I saw up here that 37% of the marriages in Saudi Arabia now in divorce. A study revealed in Saudi that was done internally that 78.36% of Saudi women experience what they call emotional divorce. Emotional divorce means I don't want him anymore. And she feels she's better than him. There's no magic, all the terms I talked about earlier. I mean, 78.6, 80%, 8 in 10 of Saudi women are looking at their husbands and they are saying, I'm just emotionally checked out, from him. And again, the greater society will always blame the men, and men do have. A lot of our men, I said, they don't know how to be men anymore. They have to share some burden in this of not being husbands, but these numbers are too high for that to be the case. For all of it is, again, unrealistic expectations built by the media. The media driven it, showing you the singer, showing you the football player, showing you all these men who have tons of money, are tall, good looking, and they think every man on the planet should be like that. When in fact, these men are less than 1% of the total. We go in earlier, people above 6'2" were 3.9. If you want to talk about people above 6'2" who basically have six figures or more, it's less than 1%. There just simply is not a lot, but this is the standard. I was hearing stories when I was over there from Saudi brothers. They were telling me they're 30 years old. They can't get married. I said, why? He said, because they're asking me to pay a dowry that I just don't know how I'm ever going to get that. My family doesn't have that kind of money. The dowry is so high. There's no way I'm ever going to be married until I'm 40 years old. And again, this fits into the agenda, because if you're not married before you're 40, you're not going to have children. The birth rates are going to continue to decline. Women across the Ummah, they idolize women of the West. I saw this and was really just disgusted by it when I lived there. The reverence that these GCC women, the Arab women, particularly the Muslim women, they looked at the Western women as heroes. This is who we want to be. They are free and they're powerful, over there. This is the chains of Islam that are holding us back. And we saw this come to a kind of climax on the international stage with the story of Rahaf Muhammad. Rahaf was a girl who grew up in Saudi, conservative household. She was wearing niqab. She decided to cross the border to Bahrain against her parents' wishes. She hopped a flight to an Asian country. It was Thailand, one of those countries over there. And then she went from there to seek asylum in Canada. And Canada more than happily welcomed her, of course. They opened up the welcoming mat. It was all over TV. Look, we got one. This is a woman that oppressive Islam. It took away her womanhood. She couldn't walk around half naked. Islam was so oppressive. And now look at her. She's free. Well, how free is Miss Rahaf Muhammad? Well, she has an OnlyFans account. You can add her to that list. She is a pornographer who is engaged both in nudity as well as lewd acts. She's already a single mother, has a kid out of wedlock, no father in the home. From what I've seen, heavily engaged in drug and alcohol use. She's in her 20s. Let's check back in 10 years when the disease really fully starts to take hold. You're going to have a broken, beaten human being who bought into this propaganda, went against the wishes of her family, because their marketing is spot on. I mean, it's $1 billion of marketing this agenda. The shaitan is going to beautify disease. He's going to make disease seem like freedom. He's going to make disease beauty. But when you strip back all the layers, you see what the disease really is. And you see generations of women are literally marching to their own destruction with a smile on their face. And it's only going to end up in misery, in life, with debt, no purpose, broken homes, dysfunctional children with mental issues. And of course, on the flip side, you're seeing men turning to video games, losing their manhood. We have a whole generation of weak, broken men who never grew up being a man, never were taught how to be a man. They've turned to video games. They've tried to get their thrills and their competitive spirit out in some outlet. You see men are the ones funneling into these OnlyFans women, all the tens of millions of dollars they're earning, or the billions in the case they're earning for their owner of the OnlyFans platform. It is really, to me, this is one of the single most important issues that we face as an Ummah. Because I lived over there and it was coming, and it hit like a ton of bricks very, very fast. And you see these Muslim girls, I used to see them in the masjid when I went there. They're coming in there. This one sister, I'll never forget it. She's wearing full makeup, no hijab. She keeps trying to walk through the men's section of the masjid. One of the brothers politely told her, you go to the other door. She's wearing, revealing clothing, tight clothing, just actively trying to seek the attention of the men. You're seeing sisters now with LGBTQ pins on their hijabs, embracing liberalism. You see all these feminist Muslim speaker females now. Some of them wear the hijab, and they come out there and they talk about a female empowerment. What exactly is that? Islam empowered the female to be what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the female to be. Didn't empower the female to be this. This is unprecedented in Islamic history to see this level of openness. And what I've heard is even in Saudi, they're using the same tricks, of course, because it's the same people. They're taking movies from the time of the Sahaba, and they're presenting the women in that period of time to be similar to the women now. So this is a mind trick. What they're trying to tell you is if you go back in time, nothing was different. Women have always been like this. This has always been healthy. Well, no, it is not. And it's a lie. And they've done the exact same thing in the West, where they take historical films or historical tales, stories, events, and they repackage them. They insert modern day language, they insert modern day morals. Like you see a lot of times LGBTQ stuff is removed, or they put pro-LGBTQ stuff in. When people in the 1700s, I'm sorry to tell you, they never had pro-LGBTQ sentiments. That didn't exist. If it did, excuse me, it was less than 1% of the population. But you watch these, we always had these views. No, we didn't. And they're doing the same exact thing here with Islam. And it's something, especially if you have young daughters. All of us, inshallah, are married, two-parent homes. It's the father's job as much as the mother's job to raise these kids right, to teach them right, and respond to this propaganda. Because the ultimate way, because as I showed earlier, the rulers are openly encouraging this. The rulers are paying money to bring these people in. They're not just allowing it. They're paying money to bring this influence in. They're spending billions of dollars in media, paying these celebrities. Now you have the wrestling. When the wrestling first came out and got the deal with Saudi Arabia, they didn't allow the female women to wrestle. Then they said, well, they can wrestle, but they got to wear an abaya-like clothing. So you started seeing that. They were getting in conditioning, increment. Then I saw a wrestling show in Saudi where they had the women were wrestling. Now they were in basically tight spandex, which was fully highlighting the shape of every single aspect of her body. In 2 years, mark my words, they will have the women fully uncovered, fully bare, just like you see in the wrestling shows that go on in this country. This is what the leaders are doing. They're not only encouraging it, but I said they're spending billions of dollars to do this, because this is all part of population, or sorry, the Agenda 2030 agenda on depopulation. They want, eventually, the long-term goal is there's no such thing as independent childbirth anymore. They've already documented these statements out there. They've said they want you to apply when you want to have a child. The child will then be grown with your own, genetic material, and then basically that child would be a ward of the state. This is the vision, they have for the world. In order to get there, they have to completely destroy the bond between the sexes. They have to drive us apart. They have to make us not want to be with each other, which we're seeing right now increasingly is happening more and more. And then they will control the births. Then they will be able to maintain the population to the numbers they seem as desirable. This is the plan. It's all in their literature. They don't hide a thing. And a lot of people who defend it, oh, this is great. Family planning. That way we'll never have too many people. We're always going to have enough balance with nature. And you hear all the leftist, climate change folks saying this is going to save the earth and all the type of stuff like this. But again, it's haram, it's anti-Islam, and it's ultimately on a path of destruction. So I hope everyone tonight really was able to have their eyes open, if you were not familiar already with this issue, to really start to spot it, start to look for it, start to notice it, how prevalent this is. And particularly, it's not just pornography, it's Instagram, it's Facebook. Every major young white Western female, now you see the same thing with African-American Western females. They have an Instagram, they have a Facebook, they're posting pictures of themselves, bare, very little clothing, getting tons of comments from men. Their egos are growing as big as a football stadium. And these women are ungovernable at that point. You cannot reach them. There's nothing that can penetrate because they're getting so much positive reinforcement. And they find that a lot of these accounts are accounts from India. These are bot accounts doing this thing, giving this extra attention to magnify this problem. They know exactly what they're doing. The same way they use the bot accounts from India for political purposes, to encourage racism, to make blacks hate whites, to make whites hate blacks, the same exact thing they are doing here as well, to feed the female ego, to make her believe she's entitled to more than her value is. And she finds at that point 81%, as I highlighted, of men as being unattractive. So hope you guys took benefit. Lots of data tonight, lots of statistics. Had to be told this way, had to kind of show it all, together, and how really it all ties in and why this matters to us as an ummah. And Sister Layla, always questions and comments.